The air in the great hall was thick with the smell of pine smoke and roasted meat, 100 different wolf scents mingling into one chaotic perfume. It was the night of the gathering when all the nearby packs came together under a full moon to talk, trade, and for the young ones to hope. Sasha of the Midnight Fang pack stood near the back, her fingers nervously tracing the rough wood of a table. She felt a familiar, odd warmth prickling in her palms, a sensation she'd hidden her whole life, scrunching her hands into fists to make it stop. She didn't know what it was, only that it made her different, and different was not always safe. But tonight she pushed the worry away. Tonight was about a different kind of magic. Tonight was about finding your mate. Everywhere she looked, pairs of eyes met and held, the powerful, silent snap of a mate bond connecting two souls chosen by the moon goddess herself. She saw a young warrior from her own pack lock eyes with a girl from the river pack, their stern faces breaking into identical, disbelieving smiles. A happy sigh went through the crowd around them. Sasha's heart ached with a longing so deep it felt like a physical pain. She wanted that. More than anything, she wanted to belong to someone, and for someone to belong utterly to her. She moved through the crowd, a silent shadow in her simple dress, feeling separate from the laughter and the buzzing excitement. And then it happened. Her gaze, wandering and hopeful, swept across the fire pit and collided with a pair of intense, dark eyes. He was from the Ridgecrest pack, a rival group known for their fierce warriors. He was tall and broad-shouldered with a sharp, handsome face. His name was Brock. The world seemed to slow, the noise of the hall fading into a dull roar. A jolt like lightning shot through her core, so powerful it stole her breath. It was a feeling of rightness, of completeness, a string pulled taut between their hearts. A small, hopeful smile touched her lips. This was it. Her moment. But Brock's face did not soften into a smile. His eyes, which had widened for a fraction of a second in recognition, narrowed. They swept over her, from her humble shoes to her nervously clasped hands, and his lip curled in a look of pure disgust. The string between them didn't sing, it strained and threatened to snap. He took a step forward and the crowd, sensing a pairing, began to quieten, turning to watch. Sasha's hope curdled into cold dread in her stomach. "You," he said, his voice loud and cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "The moon goddess pairs me with you? A nobody from a weak pack? I can smell your fear from here." He took another step, looming over her. "I am a warrior of Ridgecrest. I will be beta one day. I deserve a mate who is strong, who is a fighter, not some trembling mouse." The words were like stones, each one hitting her with brutal force. He drew himself up to his full height, his voice ringing out for all to hear. "I reject you. I reject this bond." The words "I reject you" were not just words. They were a spell. A curse. As they left his lips, Sasha felt it like a physical blow to her chest, a searing, tearing pain that made her gasp and stumble back a step. The world swam, the faces around her blurring into a mess of pity and curiosity. The beautiful, right feeling she had just experienced was ripped away, leaving a gaping, bleeding wound in her soul. A rejected mate. She was marked now. Broken. Unwanted. A hot tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek as she turned and fled, pushing through the crowd, the sound of Brock's cold laughter and the low murmurs of the onlookers chasing her out into the cold, dark night. The weeks that followed were a gray blur of pain and isolation. The rejection was a sickness that clung to her. Her own pack, who had once been her family, now looked at her with wary eyes or outright avoidance. A rejected mate was bad luck. A flaw in the moon's design. She was given the worst chores, slept in a cabin far from the others, and ate her meals alone. The warmth in her hands flared sometimes uselessly, a cruel joke of a power that couldn't fix the one thing that was broken. Her heart. She felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller and quieter, the echo of Brock's words, "weak, trembling mouse," playing over and over in her mind. It was on an evening when she was chopping wood alone, her blistered hands aching, that a stranger arrived. He was enormous, with a scar running down his cheek and the scent of a powerful, unfamiliar pack clinging to him like fog, the scent of pine and cold stone. The Shadow Ridge pack. He moved with a lethal grace that made the warriors of her own pack tense up. He ignored them all, his eyes scanning the area until they landed on her. He walked straight toward her, and Sasha froze, her knuckles white around the axe handle, expecting more trouble, more scorn. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. His voice was deep but not unkind. "Sasha?" he asked. She gave a tiny, fearful nod. "My name is Rylan. I am sent by Alpha Grayson of the Shadow Ridge pack." He spoke quietly so others wouldn't hear. "My Alpha is unwell. very unwell. His wolf is in a rage, a pain that our healers cannot touch. It is a sickness of the spirit, not the body. We have heard a rumor. His eyes flicked down to her hands for a moment. A rumor from a Ridgecrest warrior who boasted of rejecting a mate because she was a weakling with healer's hands. Sasha flinched at the words. So Brock was still mocking her. Ryland's gaze was intent. My alpha is a good leader. A fair one. But he is losing control. If he falls, our pack falls into chaos. He has asked me to find you. To bring you to him. He offers you sanctuary, a place in our pack, and his protection. All he asks is that you try. Will you come? Will you help us? Sasha looked around at her empty life, at the faces of her packmates who turned away from her. She had nothing here. Nothing but shame and a hollow ache where her future was supposed to be. This alpha, this Grayson, was offering her a chance. A purpose. Maybe even a new home. She was terrified. But deep down, under the layers of pain, a tiny spark of the girl who had hoped for a mate on gathering night flickered. She took a shaky breath and looked Rylan in the eye. Yes, she said, her voice barely a whisper but firm. I will come. The journey to Shadow Ridge was a silent, somber affair, a world away from the boisterous travel of a pack hunt. Rylan, for all his intimidating size, was a quiet and surprisingly considerate guide. He didn't press her with questions or fill the air with empty chatter, for which Sasha was profoundly grateful. The silence allowed the heavy cloak of her old life to slowly loosen its grip, mile by mile. The dense, familiar woods of the Midnight Fong territory gradually gave way to steeper, rockier paths. The air grew sharper, cooler, carrying the crisp scent of high altitude and ancient stone. This was a land of shadows and strong winds, a place that felt both harsh and powerfully alive. They crested a final ridge and Sasha's breath caught in her throat. Below them, nestled in a vast clearing against a sheer mountain face, was the Shadow Ridge Pack compound. It wasn't a haphazard cluster of cabins like her old home, but a purpose-built, formidable settlement. A high, sharpened timber wall encircled it, with watchtowers at regular intervals. The houses were built from dark, sturdy wood and gray stone, built to withstand the elements and any enemy. It spoke of strength, order, and a pack that was always prepared for a fight. As Rylan led her through the main gates, every single activity seemed to grind to a halt. Warriors sharpening blades on a whetstone stilled their hands. Women tending to vegetable gardens straightened up, their eyes wide. Children playing a chasing game between the houses froze mid-step, staring openly at the stranger. The air, which had been filled with the comfortable sounds of community, became thick with a tense, wary silence. Sasha could feel their gazes like physical touches, scanning her, judging her. She smelled their suspicion, their confusion. She was an outsider, and worse, her scent carried the faint, lingering trace of the rival Ridgecrest pack from the gathering. She kept her eyes fixed on Rylan's broad back, her heart hammering against her ribs, feeling smaller and more exposed than ever before. Rylan led her to the largest structure in the compound, a long, low cabin built directly into the base of the mountain itself. Two stern-faced guards flanked the heavy oak door, but they nodded at Rylan and stepped aside without a word. Inside, the air was different. It was warm, lit by a large fireplace where a low fire crackled, but it was also charged with a strange, oppressive energy. It smelled of herbs and poultices, of wood smoke, but underneath it all was a scent that made the wolf inside Sasha whimper, the scent of a powerful alpha in immense, agonizing pain. A severe-looking woman with gray streaking her dark hair emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on a cloth. Her eyes, tired and worried, flicked from Rylan to Sasha, and a faint frown line appeared between her brows. "This is her?" she asked, her voice hushed. Rylan merely nodded. The woman, who Sasha would later learn was named Anya and was the pack's head healer, sighed. "He's just fallen into a fitful sleep. The pain it's worse than ever. We are out of options." She looked at Sasha, not unkindly but with a deep, weary skepticism. "He's in there. Don't startle him. If he wakes, his control is thin." Rylan gestured for Sasha to go ahead. Taking a deep, trembling breath, she pushed open the door to the inner chamber. The room was dim, the curtains drawn. And there, in a large bed, was Alpha Grayson. Even in sleep he was an imposing figure. His hair was dark and tousled against the pillows, his features were strong and sharp, but now they were etched with lines of suffering. His skin was pale and gleamed with a fine sheen of sweat. His powerful body was tense, every muscle corded, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. A low, continuous growl rumbled in his chest, a sound of pure animal anguish that vibrated through the very floorboards. Sasha's fear was suddenly washed away by a wave of overwhelming pity. This wasn't just a sick alpha, this was a creature in torment. She approached the bed slowly, her footsteps silent on the fur rug. The warmth in her palms, that strange and hidden part of her, began to flare, not as a faint prickle, but as a distinct, pulsing heat. It was as if it recognized his pain and was straining to answer it. She didn't know what she was doing. She had no training, no plan. Acting on an instinct deeper than thought, she gently, so gently, placed her hands on his bare chest. The moment her skin touched his, the reaction was immediate. A soft, golden light emanated from her palms, so bright it illuminated the dark room. It wasn't a harsh light, it was warm, gentle, like liquid sunlight. Beneath her hands, Grayson's painful growl cut off abruptly. His entire body, which had been a taut bowstring, went limp. The fierce lines of pain on his face smoothed away. His breathing, which had been ragged and shallow, deepened into the slow, steady rhythm of truly peaceful sleep. The oppressive, painful energy in the room simply dissolved, replaced by a profound and healing quiet. Sasha stood there, her hands glowing on his skin, watching in awe as the mighty alpha slept without a trace of pain for the first time in months. She didn't know how long she stood there, but when the light from her hands finally faded, she felt a deep exhaustion seep into her bones. She carefully removed her hands and sank into a chair beside the bed, her mind reeling. Her secret, her curse, had actually worked. She must have dozed off herself because the next thing she knew, she felt a gaze upon her. She opened her eyes to find Grayson awake. He was propped up on one elbow watching her. His eyes, a startling shade of stormy gray, were clear and focused, no longer clouded with agony. He looked astonished. "You," he said, his voice rough from disuse but deep and resonant. "You are the one from Midnight Fong." Sasha nodded, suddenly nervous again under his intense scrutiny. "The pain, it's gone." He said it not as a question but as a statement of profound fact. "It hasn't been gone in a very long time." "What did you do?" I don't know," Sasha admitted, her voice small. "I just put my hands on you." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze taking in her nervous posture, her honest eyes. He saw no deception there, only a genuine confusion that mirrored his own shock. "Anya tells me I slept through the night. A full night." He slowly sat up, the furs pooling around his waist, revealing a torso mapped with the scars of a warrior. He looked stronger already, more solid. "Thank you," he said, the words simple but carrying immense weight. "You have given me a gift I thought was lost." From that day a new routine began. Sasha was given a small, clean cabin of her own near the main house. The pack's wariness did not vanish overnight, but it softened into a cautious, watchful curiosity. They had all seen their alpha emerge from his room looking more like himself, and they had the strange, quiet girl to thank for it. Several times a day, the pain would begin to creep back into Grayson's eyes, a darkness gathering at their edges. He would find her or send for her, and wordlessly she would place her hands on him, on his arm, his shoulder, once, when it was particularly bad, against his temple, and the golden light would flow, washing the agony away. Each session left her tired but also strangely stronger. She was learning to control it, to channel it. And in the quiet moments between the healing they talked. At first it was just polite, formal exchanges. But slowly the walls began to crumble. He asked her about her life and she found herself telling him about the loneliness of her childhood, the constant feeling of being different, and then, haltingly, about the brutal public rejection by Brock. As she spoke, she saw not pity in his eyes, but a flicker of understanding anger. He, in turn, spoke to her of the crushing weight of leadership, the constant decisions that affected every life in his pack, the loneliness of being the one everyone looked to for strength, with no one to share the burden with. He confessed his fear of his own illness, the terror of losing control and hurting his own people. One afternoon, he was feeling well enough to walk with her to the edge of the forest that bordered the pack grounds. The autumn leaves were a blaze of red and gold against the deep green of the pines. They walked in a comfortable silence for a while, until Grayson stopped, looking out over his territory. "He was a fool," Grayson said suddenly, his voice low. Sasha looked at him, confused. "Brock," he clarified, turning those stormy gray eyes on her. "He saw a quiet girl and called it weakness. He was too blind to see the strength it takes to be kind in a world that isn't. He saw someone different and called it a flaw. He was the weakest of us all, to throw away a gift like you." His words were so unexpected, so direct and fiercely sincere, that they bypassed Sasha's mind and went straight to her wounded heart. No one had ever seen her that way. No one had ever called her a gift. That evening, he asked her to join him by the large fireplace in his main room. Anya had insisted he rest, and for once, he was listening. The fire crackled, painting the room in warm, dancing shadows. They sat on a large fur rug, a comfortable space between them, but the air felt charged, alive with something unspoken. They talked of small things, of favorite seasons, of childhood dreams. Sasha found herself laughing at a story he told about trying to train a stubborn young wolf pup, and the sound of her own laughter, free and unburdened, surprised her. He smiled in return, a true, genuine smile that transformed his serious face and made her breath catch. He reached across the space between them, his movements slow, giving her every chance to pull away. His fingers, calloused and strong, gently brushed against hers. Then he turned her hand over and laced his fingers through hers, his thumb stroking a soft rhythm against her palm. Her skin tingled where they touched, a feeling 1,000 times more electric and wonderful than the healing warmth of her power. Sasha looked up from their joined hands to his face. The firelight danced in his gray eyes, which were no longer the eyes of a pained alpha, but of a man. A man looking at her not as a healer or an outcast, but as something precious. He leaned in slowly, giving her time, asking a silent question. Her heart was beating like a wild drum, but for the first time, it was not from fear. It was from a wild, hopeful, terrifying joy. She leaned in too, closing the small space between them. His free hand came up to cradle her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle. And then his lips met hers. It was not a hungry or demanding kiss. It was slow and deep and achingly tender. It was a kiss of gratitude, of understanding, of a connection being forged not by a moon goddess's decree, but by two lonely souls who had finally, miraculously, found a home in each other. It tasted of hope and of a future she had never dared to dream of. When they finally parted, breathless, foreheads resting together, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the beating of their two hearts, finally in sync. The peace that had settled over Shadow Ridge was a fragile, precious thing, like the first thin layer of ice on an autumn pond. For Sasha, the days that followed her walk with Grayson and the kiss by the fire were the happiest she had ever known. She woke each morning in her small cabin not with a sense of dread, but with a quiet hum of purpose. Her healing sessions with Grayson continued, but they had transformed. They were no longer just about chasing away pain. They were moments of charged silence, of shared glances that spoke volumes, of his hand finding hers after the golden light faded, not to let go. The pack's suspicion had thawed into a respectful, if still somewhat bewildered, acceptance. They saw the color returning to their alpha's cheeks, the strength in his stride, the way the constant shadow of anger in his eyes had been replaced by something softer when he looked at her. She had started helping Anya in the healing den, her unique gift proving miraculous for everything from a warrior's deep slash to a child's fever, slowly weaving herself into the very fabric of the pack's daily life. She was building a home, brick by careful brick, and for the first time it felt solid. It felt real. This newfound peace was shattered one afternoon with the force of a lightning strike. The warning howl from the eastern watchtower was not the standard call of a patrol return. It was sharp, short, and urgent, a signal of a direct threat. The peaceful compound erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors dropped their tasks and sprinted for the walls. Women gathered children and hurried them inside. Grayson, who had been discussing patrol routes with Rylan, immediately straightened, his face hardening into the mask of the alpha. Sasha, who had been sorting herbs with Anya, felt a cold dread trickle down her spine. She followed the others to the main gate, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. There, standing just outside the closed gates, flanked by a handful of his own Ridgecrest warriors, was Brock. He looked arrogant and smug, his chest puffed out as if he owned the very ground he stood on. His eyes scanned the assembled Shadow Ridge pack on the walls with disdain before they landed, with laser focus, on Sasha standing near Grayson. A nasty smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he called out, his voice carrying easily on the clear air. "Look what the weak little mouse found herself. A new hole to hide in." He took a step forward, ignoring the low growls that rippled through the Shadow Ridge warriors. "I heard rumors my rejected mate was playing healer for a dying alpha. I thought it was a joke. But I see it's true." His eyes flicked to Grayson, full of mockery. "Is this what Shadow Ridge has come to? Relying on my cast-offs?" Grayson didn't move a muscle, but the air around him grew cold and dangerous. "State your business, Brock, and then get off my land," he said, his voice a low, deadly rumble that promised violence. Brock's smile widened. "My business is what's mine. I made a mistake. I see that now. She might be weak, but that power of hers, that's a valuable tool. A tool I shouldn't have thrown away. I've come to take what's mine. I challenge you, Grayson. A fight for the right to claim her. Winner takes the girl. He said it like she was a prize to be won at a festival, a piece of property. The words were a slap, tearing open the old wound of his rejection and rubbing salt in it. Sasha felt a wave of nausea and burning shame. But then it was washed away by a hotter, fiercer emotion, pure rage. She opened her mouth to scream at him, to tell him she was not a thing to be fought over, but Grayson was faster. I accept, Grayson said, his voice flat and cold as iron. The word sent a shockwave through everyone. Sasha grabbed his arm. Grayson, no. You're not fully healed. He's trying to provoke you. Grayson turned to her, and for a brief moment, the mask of the alpha slipped. He looked at her, his gray eyes fierce with a protectiveness that made her heart ache. He insulted you. He insulted my pack. And he believes he can come onto my territory and claim what is mine. His voice dropped, for her ears only. You are not a prize. You are my hope. And I will fight for that. He gently pried her hand from his arm and turned to face the gates. The clearing just outside the walls became an arena. The two packs formed a wide, tense circle around the space. The air crackled with hostility. Without ceremony, both men shifted. It was a blur of tearing fabric and cracking bone, and where two men had stood, now two massive wolves faced each other. Grayson's wolf was a giant of dark charcoal gray, with intelligent, stormy eyes. Brock's was a lighter, tawny brown, bigger perhaps, but with a brutish, aggressive set to his muzzle. Brock didn't wait. He launched himself forward with a snarl, aiming straight for Grayson's throat. The fight was brutal and swift. Grayson was the more skilled fighter, more agile, his movements calculated. But Sasha could see it, the truth that made her blood run cold. Grayson was still weak. He moved a fraction too slow, his reactions dulled by months of pain and sickness. He dodged Brock's initial lunge, raking his claws down Brock's flank, but Brock just shook it off like it was nothing. Brock was all raw, youthful strength and fury. He charged again, this time catching Grayson's shoulder with his fangs, earning a pained yelp. He used his weight to bully Grayson, slamming into him, driving him back toward the tree line. Grayson fought valiantly, but he was losing ground. A deep gash opened on his leg. He was panting heavily, stumbling. Brock saw his advantage and pressed it, his attacks becoming a relentless, savage barrage. He was winning. He was going to kill Grayson and take her back to a life of misery. A terrible, cold clarity settled over Sasha. This was not about a mate bond. This was about choice. Her choice. Her power. Her love. As Brock gathered himself for what looked like a final, killing leap onto Grayson's exposed back, Sasha didn't think. She moved. She burst through the line of stunned warriors and ran into the center of the fight, placing herself directly between the injured, struggling Grayson and the advancing Brock. A collective gasp went up from both packs. Brock skidded to a halt, confusion and then annoyance flashing in his wolfish eyes. He snarled at her, a clear command to get out of the way. Sasha stood her ground, her legs trembling but her voice steady and loud, ringing out across the clearing. No, Brock. I'm not yours. You threw me away. You call me weak. You don't get to change your mind. She focused everything she had, every ounce of her love for Grayson, every bit of her anger at Brock, every shred of her own hard-won strength. She raised her hands not in surrender but in command. A light erupted from her palms, but it was unlike anything she had ever produced before. It wasn't the gentle, golden healing light. It was a brilliant, blinding, white-hot radiance, a pure wave of protective energy. It shot toward Brock, not to heal but to repel. It hit him like a physical wall. He yelped in shock and pain, the light seeming to burn him not on his skin, but deep inside in his very spirit. He was thrown backward, tumbling end over end, blinded and disoriented. She turned her back on him, the light still shimmering around her like a halo, and knelt by Grayson's wounded wolf. She placed her hands on his fur, and this time the gentle golden light returned, flowing into him, sealing the gashes, pouring strength back into his weary body. She looked up, her eyes finding Brock as he shakily got to his feet, shifted back into his human form, blinking and shielding his eyes from her fading radiance. I reject you, Brock, she shouted, her voice clear and powerful, echoing off the mountainside. I reject you and your cruelty. I reject the bond you shattered. My heart is not yours to claim. My power is not your tool. My choice is my own. She stood up, helping a now-healed Grayson to stand beside her in his human form. She looked at the mighty alpha beside her, then back at her defeated former mate. And I choose him. I choose Grayson. I choose Shadow Ridge. This is my home. Now get off our land and never come back. Brock was humiliated, defeated not by fang and claw, but by the very power he had scorned. His warriors looked ashamed. Without another word, he turned and fled, his pack scrambling after him, disappearing into the trees, vanquished. Silence descended on the clearing, broken only by the heavy breathing of the onlookers. Then Grayson turned to Sasha. He didn't look at her like a healer or a savior. He looked at her with awe, with pride, with a love so deep and fierce it stole the breath from her lungs. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "You are," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "the strongest, bravest, most magnificent creature I have ever known." He looked out at his pack, his voice rising to include them all. "The moon goddess gave you to Brock by mistake. But you chose me. You chose us." He dropped to one knee before her, not as an alpha to a subject, but as a man to his equal, his partner, his future. "Sasha, you have saved me in every way a person can be saved. Will you do me the greatest honor? Will you stand by my side? Will you be my Luna? My mate? My love?" Tears of pure joy streamed down Sasha's face. This was the moment she had stopped dreaming of. This was better than any destined bond. This was chosen. This was earned. "Yes," she breathed, her voice cracking with emotion. "Yes, Grayson. 1,000 times yes." He surged to his feet and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around before crushing her to his chest in a passionate, searing kiss that held a lifetime of promises. It was a kiss of victory, of love, of a future brighter than anything they could have imagined. The Shadow Ridge pack erupted into cheers, howls of approval and joy echoing against the mountains, welcoming their new Luna, their hope, their future. Sasha was no longer the cast aside. She was chosen. She was loved. She was home. And if you want to join us for more stories of love that conquers all, of strength found in unexpected places, and of hearts finding their true home, make sure to subscribe to the channel. A new adventure is always just around the corner.